Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on social media at MMALOTN. This week, we are going over the big UFC 273 card, headlined by two title fights. In the main event, we got the featherweight strap on the line between Alexander Volkanovski and short notice-ish Korean Zombie stepping in for Max Holloway, who had to pull out literally a day or two after they had originally announced the fight. Took them a couple days, and in steps Korean Zombie on a little bit of a short notice. And in the co-main event, we have the rematch of the bantamweight title between Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling. We're trying to right the wrongs of what occurred in their first fight. Aljamain Sterling getting a little bit too much flack from the public. The guy's still a very skilled fighter, but Petr Yan went out there for an interim title against Corey Sandhagen and showcased why he's still one of the best fighters in the world, absolutely shutting down Sandhagen and getting that interim strap. But his eyes are set on the undisputed title, that is which finds its home with Aljamain Sterling at the moment, but we will see if Yan can recapture that this weekend. A couple other fun fights sprinkled out throughout the card, not to mention the return of Khamzat Chimaev taking on his first legitimate test here, although I don't want to besmirch Li Jingliang's name too much, but Gilbert Burns, a top 5 ranked welterweight. Let's see if Khamzat Chimaev's height is actually worth it and whether Gilbert Burns will be able to derail that or not. But before we get into the card, as always, let's go over the betting recap of the last event, which was UFC Columbus, and man, was it a stinker. Not only was it a stinker, but I went 9-3 on predictions and still ended up getting reverse swept on my bets, just not picking the best spots to go out there and actually pull the trigger on. Is what it is. Happy with my predictions, but at the end of the day, my betting accounts were slightly lower in terms of its dollar value, especially after that event. So let's start off with the lock of the night play. It started off pretty well with Neil Magny getting the dub there, although it was via split decision. I'd say, maybe 2 out of 3 times, or sorry, 2 or 3 out of 10 times if Neil Magny and Max Griffin fought, Max Griffin probably drops him in that first round, and that was probably one of those 2 or 3 times. But outside of that, Neil Magny was able to do what he needed to do, taking over in the second and third rounds and taking home a decision victory. Unfortunately, Askar Askarov drops the ball after having a dominant first round. In the third round, he just did not have the urgency, nor did he have the success with getting his grappling going, and Kai Car-France was able to take rounds 2, round 3, and win that fight via decision, which I believe the odds were pretty wide for him to win via decision, as a lot of people thought that his success, if it were to come, would be via knockout. But that's why we play the game that is MMA, because we never know exactly what's going to happen. Not to mention, in January, we just saw Francis Ngannou win a wrestling-based decision over Cyril Gane. So that is the crazy world of MMA. Lock of the night play, shits the bed. That's minus 3.5 units there. I did not go the full 5 units, as we're getting minus 114 odds on that parlay. I didn't want to get too greedy in case something like that played out with Askarov not getting the win. So we falter on the lock of the night play there. Dog of the night play was Aliaskarab Khizriev against Denis Tululin to go over 1.5 rounds. We missed that by 30-ish seconds. I was very happy when that fight got into the second round, and I thought we'd see Dennis survive a little bit longer, but Khizriev managed to get the fight to the ground and just was able to get the finish there. So hats off to Khizriev, but unfortunately the dog of the night play does not cash. And then lastly, I had a 1.35 units on the Brown and Barberena fight to not go to a decision, and good Lord, did they deliver on a great fight that night. Unfortunately, the fight still goes to a decision, so you lose minus 1.35 units there. So all in all, like I said, reverse sweep, minus 5.85 units. Not my best showing of the year. But again, I find some solace in being able to call predictions 9-3. But at the end of the day, it's the money that's in the betting accounts that matters the most. And obviously after this, we're down 5.5, almost 6 units at this point in time on this last UFC Columbus event. But eyes are now fully on UFC 273. We had a week off. We got to take a little bit of time and take our time to get through the tape study. And that's exactly what your boy did. I didn't rush anything. Just finished up all the tape studying now. And Best Bets and Props article has been posted on the Patreon for a couple days now. Got a couple other great things coming to that Patreon, not to mention a great Discord community as well. Shout out to all those guys. I know I haven't been in there as much over the last week, or at least the last month and a half, being in there kind of sporadically, but I still enjoy jumping in there when I do get the opportunity to do so. So make sure you guys check out the Patreon, early access to the bets, the breakdowns, all that good stuff, and not to mention Prize Picks tips is on there as well, so you guys get plenty to chew on for only $5 a month. That's pretty much 4 cards a month, considering the pace that the UFC is going at. So make sure you guys go check that out. And secondly, make sure you guys check out Coolbet. Promo code MMALOTN2, and they'll match your initial deposit up to $200. Great website for a lot of things. Sometimes they're slow with updating their lines, so you're able to get better lines on fights that you may be kind of falling behind on, or parlaying props. I know a lot of people like scratching that degenerate itch by parlaying some props. That's exactly what you're going to be able to do on Coolbet as well. So make sure you guys go check them out. Once again, promo code is MMALOTN2, and they'll match your initial deposit up to $200. All right. That's a wrap on the intro stuff. Let's get right into the breakdowns. And if you guys watched the last episode, you guys know I'm going back to doing all this in one shot, something that I kind of enjoyed from back in the day. And given how long of a process it takes to do every single individual video, process each one, and then put it all together, and then process it again, it takes up a little bit too much time. I could be using that time to either update the tape index or even update the Best Bets and Props article and getting ahead on the schedule. So I won't be dropping early video breakdowns anymore, but all the breakdowns will be in written format in the Patreon as soon as I finish each matchup. So make sure you guys go check that out, like I said. But we're going to be ringing off these breakdowns one after the other, one shot, old school vibes. Let's get it going. So first fight of the night, or at least according to Tapology. They don't even have the main card set, obviously, considering that the Gastelum and Duplessis fight fell off a couple of days ago. So they're still kind of in scramble mode in terms of figuring out how they're going to, fill the hole that's left on the main card there. But we will go with the format that Tapology currently has. And like I said, first fight of the night is going to be Julio Arce and Daniel Santos in the bantamweight division. UFC debut of Daniel Santos, Wily Cat is his nickname. Very fun fighter. I had a ton of fun watching his tape. I pretty much watched everything that we have posted on the tape index just so I can get a good feel of what we're getting with Daniel Santos. And what we're getting is a guy that just fights like his nickname. Like I said, he's very wild, likes to throw a lot of spinning stuff, is very, forward pressure oriented, likes to move forward, put pressure on his opponents, and throw big shots as well. And either he finds the knockout or he's able to just pressure his opponents up against the cage and just really do some good work there. Most often than not, when opponents try to get into the ground, that's where they find the most success. There's one of his opponents on the regional scene at ACA, which, although it's the regional scene, technically, it's still one of the best spots for guys to really fight tough competition before they make it to the UFC. I think it's tougher to get through ACA and Fight Night Global and a couple of these other Russian shows, M1 Global, compared to like the LFAs or the Cage Warriors. And I think that's where we see Daniel Santos, prove that he can hang and stick with these elite level guys. And that's where he took his first ever loss, but it wasn't without a fight. His opponent dragged him to the ground over and over again, but Santos was able to get to his feet, dish out some damage, and then unfortunately get taken down once again. I'd be surprised if Julio Arce would have as much grappling success as that guy had, because he's even fought other guys that were trying to implement a grapple-heavy game plan. His takedown defense looked good, his cage wrestling looked good, his get-ups looked good, and then he went back to work with his striking, which a lot of opponents were not able to keep up with. So I like what we see from Daniel Santos. I like his aggressiveness, like I said. And with Julio Arce, who likes to have a clean fight from the outside and kind of use his range and his southpaw stance to cause his opponents confusion, when guys are kind of just crashing forward and giving him some resistance, that's where he finds the most trouble. Like even if we look back at the Shaman Moraes fight, the for the majority of the fight, Julio Arce is getting the better of him by just picking him apart from the range. But when Shaman Moraes crashes forward and lets his hands go, he was able to drop Julio Arce on numerous occasions, which is why he ended up coming out with the win there. I feel like Daniel Santos can do a similar thing, right? He wants to go in there, crash the pocket, let his big shots go, and try to drop his opponent or find the knockout. And I think he can do that here against Arce. Like I said, when we see Arce at his best, he's able to replicate what he did in the Andre Ewell fight 2 fights ago. Stay at distance, utilize his leg kicks, let his hands go once his opponent crashes the pocket. But when he's fighting guys like Song Yadong, Shaman Moraes, or even Hakeem Dawodu, guys that are willing to engage with him in the pocket, that's where he starts to falter. That's where he starts to falter under the pressure and power of his opponents. And that's exactly what I think we're going to see from Daniel Santos, who's going to be able to crash the pocket, land his big strikes, maybe even find a knockout, find a knockdown, and that should be enough to get the judges on his side. So Julio will really need to stay safe in those spots where they start exchanging in the pockets. Otherwise, I think he's going to get hit. I think he's going to get dropped. And again, I think he could get finished. So I love this underdog price tag that we're getting on Daniel Santos at plus 160. I even see him at plus 170 at a couple of spots. I'm going to take the underdog shot here on the guy. I think he has the perfect style to give Julio Arce problems. And I'm a guy that's been big on Julio in the past. I thought he had top 10 potential when he came into the UFC after he defeated Dan Ige. But he's 3-3 in his last 6 fights, and albeit, against decent competition, Shaman Moraes and Hakeem Dawodu, and obviously the last time he got knocked out by Song Yadong. But I'm not saying that Daniel Santos is going to be this crazy killer in the division. I just think that he is a great stylistic matchup here, or has a great stylistic matchup here to get his hand raised in his UFC debut. So I'm going to go with Daniel Santos, and I'm going to pick him to win this fight, probably by KO. I'm not going to call a round. That's always very difficult to do. He could do it in the first round. He could do it in the second round. And his cardio has shown that he can even do it in the third round if he needs to. But I'm going to take Daniel Santos, and I'm going to take him to win this fight via knockout. All right, next up, we got Kay Hansen taking on UFC newcomer Piera Rodriguez. She's coming in off of her Dana White Contender Series victory, which actually was right after she won the LFA title in a 5th round TKO victory over her opponent. In the Dana White Contender Series fight, we saw a pretty much well-rounded game from her compared to what we've been seeing when she was on the regional scene, where she was going out there and just absolutely starching these girls with mainly just her striking. But in the Contender Series fight, we saw her go out there and land takedowns, engage in the clinch, and really try to get her ground game going, which is showing signs of improvements from Piera Rodriguez, which I can't wait to see going into this fight against Kay Hansen, who's clearly going to be the best fighter that she's faced to this point, especially in the grappling realm, which is where I think Kay Hansen is going to look to take this fight. Now, it is a pick'em fight here, but the odds have gone all over the place. A lot of love coming in on Piera Rodriguez late last week, and then the money coming back in on the Hansen side to pretty much put this fight back down to a pick'em, which has pretty much been the entire time. Or where I think it should have been the entire time, sorry. I do lean the Kay Hansen side because she is showing improvements in her striking, which she's obviously going to be at a disadvantage in this specific fight. But I do like her improvements that we've been seeing, but her ability to mix this fight up and be the clearly better BJJ player, which I think we're going to see showcased here, I think that will be the difference maker in this fight. She could go out there and, strike with Piera for a round, maybe get Piera into this false sense of confidence where she thinks that this is going to be a striking battle, and then bang, before you know it, this fight will probably hit the ground, and I think that's where we're going to see Kay Hansen do her best work. I don't want to have too much money riding on this fight. Again, I know Piera is improving in the grappling realm, and I feel like she's going to have to show even more improvements here, especially to deal with the grappling of Kay Hansen. But if she's not able to show in those improvements, I think that Kay Hansen will absolutely cruise from on top, or she'll be able to find a submission at a certain point as well. So I do lean the Kay Hansen side ever so slightly. Nothing big here. Again, it's more so of a sit back and see what Piera Rodriguez brings to the table. Whereas for the Kay Hansen side, this could be a do or die fight for her, right? She goes out there and she loses. she could get cut. That's going to be 3 straight losses, and it's just not going to look good on her record. And, even though she is still young, she has a lot to still offer. I think that she might even benefit if she loses this fight. She might benefit from getting cut, fighting on the regional scene a little bit more, and then getting back into the UFC after she's been a little bit more battle tested. But luckily for her, I do think she ends up picking up the victory here. She's going to have to put on a complete mixed martial arts performance, though, to get it done, because if she goes out there and tries to have a 15-minute kickboxing matchup with Pieta, she's going to get touched up. And I do like the Kay Hansen side, though, just because I do think she can hold her own in the striking, but she won't be able to hold her own for the majority of the fight. If that's where she wants to keep it, she'll have to mix in the grappling, mix in the clinch work, get this fight to the ground, and really start wearing on Pieta Rodriguez from on top. So the pick is going to be Hansen. No bet. No real, eagerness to bet it, but I do lean on the Hansen side, as I do think she'll be able to grind out from Pieta from on top, either winning this fight via decision or via submission. I think both of those are absolutely plausible here. All right, let's move on to the middleweight division here, where we have a fight between Anthony Fluffy Hernandez and short notice Josh Fremd. In terms of odds, we got minus 200 on Fluffy and plus 170 the return on Josh Fremd. Now, Josh Fremd, I believe he earned his UFC contract after the Looking for a Fight episode that they did at FAC. If I'm not mistaken, that was the night that the Nelk boys were in town and they were trying to find a fighter that they can sponsor or at least manage whatever they were trying to do. But Fremd put on a solid performance that night, dealing with the length and the explosiveness of his opponent. I think the guy's name was Bauman. Blanking on the first name, but Bauman was very fast, a very heavy hitter, having some good success from the outside, but eventually Fremd was able to catch up with him and then eventually get him out of there with his own, I believe it was a TKO that he got that night. Let me just quickly pull that up. But yeah, great performance from him there. He's 9-2, trains out of Factory X Muay Thai in Denver, Colorado. And yeah, he got a rear naked choke in the second round against Joe Bauman, who seemed to be starting to slow down in that fight. The last time we saw Fremd lose was actually via knockout to Gregory Rodriguez in a fight that he was like a minus 230 favorite in. And if I'm not mistaken, that was right after Gregory Rodriguez had been knocked out by Jordan Williams on the Contender Series. And a lot of people thought that he was very fragile, very chinny. Unfortunately, Josh Fremd paid for it, and Gregory Rodriguez was able to get the knockout of his own. But preceding that, he had 3 straight first-round knockouts: Lamar Gossi, Antonio Jones, Bruno Oliveira. Josh Fremd was showing that he had a lot of dynamite in his hands, and he was able to get those guys out of there. But the thing that I'm most intrigued by is the fact that none of these fighters since the Lamar Gossi fight have really tried to test Josh Fremd in the grappling realms, as that seems to be his weak spot. Lamar was able to get a pretty easy takedown that night, but Lamar did not seem like a guy that was in shape nor willing to even to be in that division to begin with. But after Fremd was able to get back to his feet, he was able to get his own shots off, land some beautiful knees, and then get him out of there. Fluffy Hernandez, when he is on, he reminds me of a Cain Velasquez, from his prime days, where he's going out there putting the pressure on his opponents with his strikes, but looking to get the fight to the ground and either pummel them into the floor with ground and pound or find a submission victory of his own. I think a lot of people have been giving him, a hard time because of the knockout loss that he suffered to Kevin Holland, and then obviously before that he got choked out by Marcus Perez. But we know that he provides much more than what he showcased in those fights. The Jung Park fight was a really good back and forth fight where we saw him very much tested, but he was able to pull off an anaconda choke that night and get the victory. Whereas on the flip side, and then obviously he lost to Kevin Holland after that, and then in his next fight against Rodolfo Vieira, big underdog, showed off his BJJ defense very, very well that night, and was able to stop the submissions of Vieira, waiting for him to gas out, and then eventually getting that finish via submission in his own right, which was hilarious as well. But good win from there. Was matched up with a couple different guys on this card: Dricus Duplessis, Albert Duraev, and then obviously now he's going up against Josh Fremd, as there's been a lot of shakeup on this card for guys jockeying to get other matchups. But I think that this is a great fight for him. The only question mark I have is his durability, right? Like, he gets hurt by Kevin Holland to the body, he gets hurt by Marcus Perez to the body, and then eventually choked there. Josh Fremd, if he's smart, maybe he looks to target the body in this fight as well. But I wonder how much success Josh will have, especially being on the back foot for the majority of this fight, as I expect him to be. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez is going to push the pressure from the minute this fight starts, and I think he'll eventually land those takedowns and be able to get some good work done from on top. I need to see Hernandez eat some more shots and still win a fight before I can trust him at minus 200, though. The spot that I'm looking at, a little bit chalky right now, but I see the finish happening from either side, whether it's Josh Friend finding a knockout or Hernandez getting a finish of his own, whether it's with ground and pound or a submission. Minus 350, a little bit chalky, but given how I expect this fight to go, I do think that we'll see Hernandez get his hand raised and get that finish while doing so. I love Hernandez. I think he's a great prospect. Even if you guys go back and watch his fight in 2018 where he went a full 5 rounds with Brendan Allen, great fight, and we could truly see what his potential was that night. But I think we're going to see him start to recapture that as he starts stringing a couple wins together. And one of them here is going to be where he gets this win over Josh Fremd, and I think he gets that finish. So I'll go Anthony Hernandez inside the distance, but the fight doesn't go to decision is probably one of my favorite lines from that fight. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got Alexei Oleinik going up against Jared Vanderaa. I believe they might throw this fight on the main card just given how much they like Alexei Oleinik, but as of right now, this fight is fourth, I believe, on the fourth on Topology's bout order. So that's what I'm going to be going with. In terms of odds, we got to pick 'em fight here, right? We got Alexei Oleinik, who was supposed to fight Ilir Latifi 2 weeks ago in UFC Columbus. Unfortunately, Latifi pulled out during or right before the fights were about to kick off, and Oleinik was originally scheduled to have that fight rescheduled to this card. Unfortunately, Latifi still couldn't get healthy enough, or what he was dealing with, could not get it rectified in time, and in steps Jared Vanderaa to take on Alexei Oleinik. Now, I don't have many thoughts on this fight. It's a very difficult fight to break down. It could be a very volatile fight as well. Like, I could see one of these situations where Oleinik just finds a trip, a throw, some sort of takedown and gets on top of Vanderaa and eventually finds a submission. Or Vanderaa, being the big dope he is, he could probably just keep Oleinik on the outside with his striking and with his movement. It's good that they're in the bigger cage as well, so Vanderaa can kind of traverse it a little bit better. But I think he wants to make up for that loss to Andrei Arlovski last time around. But Vanderaa is not like a crazy knockout puncher. If you guys go and watch his fights, he likes leaning on volume. He likes leaning on output, kind of just, sticking and moving as best as possible, throwing in combinations, throwing in leg kicks. And I could see that what he might look to do here against Oleinik, who, it can be kind of easy at times to knock him out, but it could also be very difficult to get him out of there, as we saw in the Fabricio Verdum fight, as we saw in the Sergey Spivak fight. And again, Vanderaa doesn't strike me as a guy that's a big knockout puncher. So he's going to have a very relentless Oleinik coming at him the entire time, but if he can traverse the cage properly here, keep him on the end of his jab, and stay moving so he doesn't get taken down, I think that he can win this fight relatively easily too. So the pick here is going to be Vanderaa, slight lean towards him. It's just a little bit of a question mark regarding the fact that he's taking this fight on short notice, but if he's able to go out there and give us a solid 12 minutes without getting taken down, I could see him cruising to a decision victory here. So the pick's going to be Jared Vanderaa. Not a lot of love on it from my end of things, but I do like him to win this fight, and I'll take him to win it via decision. All right, let's move on to the next one here. We got a great fight between Vince Pichel and Mark Madsen. In terms of odds, we got minus 140 on Pichel and plus 120 the return on Mark Madsen. Now, the last time we saw Mark Madsen, I believe he was in a co-main event slot against Clay Guida, and that was a very uncharacteristic performance from Mark Madsen, but that's exactly what he needed to get the job done. He did not go out there and try to grapple with Clay Guida, who's an energizer bunny, full of cardio, and would have more than likely engaged and welcomed that kind of fight from Mark Madsen. But Mark used the threat, just knowing, having Clay Guida think that he's going to go for the takedown. He used that against him by letting his striking go, clinching up with him a couple times against the cage, landing some good strikes, but then mainly just trying to set a decent enough pace that he wouldn't completely gas out, and so that he can go out there and try to outstrike Clay Guida, show off the guns and the striking that he's been trying to attain over there at Fight Ready with Eddie Chan, Santino DeFranco, and those guys. But I'd be surprised if he's going to go out there and try to do the same thing here against Vince Pichel. Pichel is the much better striker. His wrestling is improving. And even when he does get taken down by guys like Gregor Gillespie and other fighters that have tried to do the same, even Austin Hubbard, he does a good job of getting back to his feet and really making his opponents work to try to establish that top control. Because if they're not able to do so, then he can let his striking go and he's going to get to wear on their gas tank because he has a pretty damn good gas tank of his own. So I'm curious to know how Mark Madsen is going to be approaching this fight. Is he going to go for takedowns? Because if he does, he's going to be working hard for them, and that cardio is going to start to take a hit, just as we saw when he fought Austin Hubbard. Or is he going to go out there and strike with Vince Pichel, which I think would be a bad idea because Pichel is clearly the much better striker in this fight. So, again, very interested to see how they approach it. I know those guys down there at Fight Ready will have a great game plan to deal with Vince Pichel. I just don't know if they'll get him to execute it properly here against a veteran like From Hell Pichel. So I get why Pichel is the slight favorite in this spot, minus 140, minus 130 at certain spots. I don't know. I feel like I should have some reservations about the Pichel pick, but I really don't. Like, I do think he goes out there and has a solid enough performance here against Madsen. Puts his strikes together, finds that knockout probably later in this fight. Madsen needs to wrestle. Madsen needs to get an early finish here, because if he doesn't, things get very shaky for him, I think, as we saw when he fought Austin Hubbard. Now, plug in Vince Pichel for Austin Hubbard. I think we see Pichel get a finish if he was the one in that third round against Madsen that night. So I'm going to go with From Hell, Vince Pichel. I'm seeing some love coming on Mark Madsen, so I wouldn't be surprised if we can get a better line on Vince once the fight gets a little bit closer. So it might be a good idea to stay patient with this line, but I still do like Vince here, and I think he gets that knockout. Let's call it third round here against Mark Madsen. All right, let's move on to the next fight. We got Mickey Gall, I believe, trying to save his UFC job here because he is on a. Actually, no, he's been exchanging wins and losses over his last couple fights. He's wow, look at that. Going back to the night that he beat Sage Northcutt, which was December of 2016. He's exchanged nothing but wins and losses. Win against Sage, loss against Randy Brown. Win against George Sullivan, loss against Diego Sanchez. Win against Salim Tahari, loss against Mike Perry. Win against Jordan Williams, loss against Alex Morono. And I think he's going to be bucking that trend here and losing once again to Mike Malott. I really like Malott in this spot. Minus 190 is what he is coming in at, plus 165 the return on Mickey Gall. But I've been hearing about this Malott kid for a long time. Not to mention, he actually fought on one of the shows that I was a logistics manager for, Substance Cage Combat. We had a very tough time trying to find an opponent for him and trying to get his game, or trying to find somebody that was willing to take a fight with him. We eventually found a guy in Alan Wilson who, seemed to just be the guy that would take any fight, and Mike Malott made him pay for it almost immediately, finishing him pretty quickly in that first round. The guy has great striking. He has a great jiu-jitsu base as well. The only kind of concern has been his durability. However, he used to be a 145er. Now he's a 170er. He was much younger. It was a lot easier for him to make weight back in the day. He did struggle a couple times. I believe he missed weight when he fought Hakeem Dawodu, but got knocked out in that fight. Didn't seem like the weight cut really helped him there. Then he took a year off, came back up a weight class, and fought, I can't recall the guy's name, but he went to a draw with him. He had a very dominant first round, and then in the second and third round, it seemed like his opponents started to pick it up, but it still seemed like Malott was a little bit lost in the second and third rounds there. Now he's at 170 pounds. Now he's fighting like legit guys, and I feel like he's going to showcase what his true potential is. Like I said, great striking. He's going to be the much better striker here against Mickey Gall. It all depends on how he's going to react when he gets hit, because he's going to get hit. He did a really good job in the Solomon Renfro fight where he got hit. It looked like he got hurt a little bit early in that fight, but after that he was able to take over, and then he eventually found the submission in that fight as well. We saw him get the quick submission victory as well in his Dana White Contender Series fight, which punched his ticket to the UFC. But here against Mickey Gall, if he doesn't beat Mickey Gall, then all of the hype that he had before, all of the touting that a lot of people were doing for him way back in the day was all for naught, because Mickey Gall, albeit a decent fighter, he's not Mike Malott's level. I think skill for skill, Malott absolutely runs through him in this spot. But Mickey Gall has been known to kind of bite down on the mouthpiece and really start to let it go with his hands. If he finds that chin of Malott, he could, find some success. But I do think that Malott will stay safe in this fight. I think he will be very much benefiting from being at 170 pounds, especially with his durability, where he'll be able to kind of let the rest of his game go. Whether it's going to be with takedowns, I think he's the better jiu-jitsu player, honestly. And even with the striking, if he keeps him straight and right down the middle, he's going to get to the target a lot quicker than the kind of winging hooks that we've been seeing from Mickey Gall over the last couple fights. So I'm going to go Malott. Does he finish him? Let me just see what I had in my best bets and props order, because I believe I do have him down for a finish here. Malott inside the distance is currently hanging around plus 110. I do believe that's how he'll get it done. I think he'll land probably a club and sub. Let's call it a club and sub that he'll eventually be able to land here against Mickey Gall. But I do think he'll be the better fighter in the cage. And as long as Malott's durability holds up, he should be able to run through Gall here. Again, don't take too much from the fact that Malott went to a draw with a guy that was 5-4 at the time. I think there's a lot of question marks about Malott, especially the weight cut that he was having, and the confidence issues after taking his first ever loss in the way that he did against Hakeem Dawodu. But I think that he's starting to bounce back the way that he should, and I think we're going to see him go out there and showcase what kind of potential this guy actually has. So I'm going to go Malott and Malott inside the distance. All right, let's move on to the next fight here, and we got Aspen Ladd taking on Raquel Pennington. Short notice Raquel Pennington. In terms of odds, we got minus 190 for Raquel Pennington, plus 165 is the return on Aspen Ladd. Now, this is one of those fights where we're truly going to test the what have you done for me lately type of narrative that a lot of people like to put into gambling, right? Aspen Ladd, she was a decent favorite over Norma Dumont last time around, and she just could not let her game go. She could not get anything going, and unfortunately, she took an L that night, a very bad L. It was a very bad performance from her. She didn't shoot. She couldn't really let her hands go. Dumont was just beating her to the punch every single time, and Aspen Ladd almost looked stuck in mud. But we know when Aspen Ladd is at her best, she's able to push her opponents up against the cage, drag them to the floor, and have really good success with the scrambling from on top and even just being able to dish out damage from on top. And I think that's what we're going to see here against Raquel Pennington. Pennington in her last several fights has really been tying up with her opponents against the cage, trying to find success there, and she is finding success there, but there are openings that I see where Aspen Ladd should be able to take advantage. Ladd does a good job in terms of digging for underhooks and pushing her opponent up against the cage and reversing positions, but she's even better at cage wrestling and dragging fights to the ground from those positions. Her striking still needs a little bit of work. It does look a little bit rudimentary at times. So yeah, Raquel Pennington will likely be the better striker here. But I do think that Pennington will struggle once this fight hits the mat. That's kind of been her kryptonite whenever she does lose fights. And Macy Chiasson was having some good success from on top, where she was having, a good ground and pound and a good control from on top in that first round. Unfortunately, she gave it up in the second round, where Raquel was able to find a beautiful front choke and get her out of there. But I think we're going to see a better version of Aspen Ladd than we did last time. I think we're going to see the version who was a slight favorite against Tremaine Durandamy, a big favorite in all of her other fights, a slight favorite against Norma Dumont. Now, all of a sudden, she takes her second loss in a very weird fight, a fight that she was very uncharacteristic, and she didn't really get much of her grappling off, which is something that she relies on heavily. I think she'll be able to do that here against Raquel Pennington, who, mind you, coming in on short notice here, and I think mainly due to the fact that her significant other, Tecia Torres, is on this card as well. I think that's why she decided to take this fight, but she's coming in on short notice against a fighter in Aspen Ladd who's going to be able to push the pace from the first minute to the 15th minute. So I think Raquel will struggle with the grappling here, Aspen Ladd, and I think we'll see Ladd have tremendous success from on top, ground and pound, maybe even submission attempts, but I think we see Ladd grind her out and eventually get a decision victory. So I'm going to go with Aspen Ladd, and I'll take her to win this fight, like I said, via decision. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got Jairzinho Rozenstruik going up against Marcin Tybura. In terms of odds, we got minus 150 for Rozenstruik and plus 130 the return on Marcin Tybura. Now, this line is wide. It's a little bit too wide, but I still see the guy that's favored getting the win. Now, Marcin Tybura is a great fighter all around. He's a good, decent enough striker, but he gets his best work done when he's able to mix the whole martial arts together. And that's meaning with, getting his clinch game going, getting his takedowns going, and really just roughing up his opponents from on top. See the Maxim Grishin fight as to what I mean by Marcin Tybura. When he puts everything together well, that's the type of performance we get from him. And that's what we're going to need here against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. However, I think there's just going to be, at least something that we've seen from Jairzinho over his last several fights is he makes it very difficult for opponents who are looking to have a grappling advantage over him be dominant with it, right? Alistair Overeem could not get him out of there, and he had 5 rounds to do so, even with a couple of takedowns that he was able to land there. Curtis Blades, 15 minutes, just, ragging on top of him, trying to get him out of there, but was unable to do so. Rozenstruik does a really good job in terms of nullifying that success that his opponents have. Obviously, you still get held down at times, but sometimes you see him working to get back to his feet. And then even on the feet, he does a good job in terms of kind of maintaining his distance at times. I think in those exchanges, that's where Marcin Tybura is going to falter. That's where Rozenstruik is going to be able to land that big bomb. But it's very difficult to make a case to pay minus 150 for a guy whose win condition is solely a knockout. Right, let me see what his KO line currently sits at, because I'd much rather pay that plus 125, plus 120, depending on the bookie that you're looking at. That's what you're getting for Rozenstruik to win by knockout. And in my opinion, that's really his only win condition in this fight. Because, I think Tybura will likely land takedowns and be able to be the more active fighter in this spot. But with Rozenstruik, all it takes is one punch. Ask Alistair Overeem, right? Ask a bunch of the guys that he's been knocking out en route to, he had that big fight against Francis Ngannou. I think he knocked out Andrei Arlovski before that as well. So Rozenstruik is all about having that nuclear power, but not much else, right? He's a fadeable fighter. So I completely understand why people are taking the Tybura shot at underdog odds here, but they got to be wary for the full 50 minutes that he's not going to get knocked out. I just see too many deficiencies in Marcin's striking game, especially when he's already been grappling a lot in that fight. Everything starts to get sloppier and sloppier. And as that happens, that's where Jairzinho Rozenstruik will eventually find that knockout blow, in my opinion. And one thing, I say this almost every single time that Rozenstruik or a couple of these other heavyweights I'm about to mention fights, is the heavyweight knockout gauntlet that I kind of have made up in my head. We have level 1 of Walt Harris. We saw Marcin Tybura go up against him, and he lost in that fight. The next level up he beat Walt Harris, right? He got rocked in that fight early in that fight, but managed to roll through it and eventually get the finish of his own at the ending of that first round. The Greg Hardy fight. Greg Hardy's not a part of the KO gauntlet anymore, especially considering that he's cut from the UFC, but even he rocked Tybura, but couldn't get him out of there. Now, give me Jairzinho's power and landing those same shots against Tybura. Tybura's probably going to go out. And, like I said, for the heavyweight KO gauntlet, Jairzinho Rozenstruik is the next step up after Walt Harris. And if he can't pass Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and he barely passed Walt Harris, almost getting finished in that fight, I think things get a little bit iffy. Obviously, after that is Derek Lewis, who's already beaten Marcin Tybura, and then the king is obviously going to be Francis Ngannou. But I think that Rozenstruik will deal with a lot of adversity here. Might even be a good hedge opportunity. Not a hedge, but a live betting opportunity if you guys are watching this fight live. After round 1, likely Rozenstruik will be an underdog. But I think that knockout is going to happen at a certain point in this fight. It'll be harder and harder for Tybura to get those top positions and get the fight to the ground. And then from there, he's going to be a sitting duck on the feet, and I think it's just a matter of time before Rozenstruik lands that perfect bomb to put him out. So I'll go Jairzinho Rozenstruik, not paying minus 150 on him, even that plus 110, plus 125 on his KO prop. I want something a little bit juicier than that, but I still think he gets it done. I think he gets the knockout, and he gets the victory as well. All right. Let's move on to the next fight here. We got the return of Ian Garry going up against Darian Weeks. In terms of odds, we got minus 360 now on Garry and plus 295 the return on Darian Weeks. Before even tape starting this fight, I thought I'd be on the weak side, right? I wasn't impressed with Ian Garry in his UFC debut. He was pretty much getting beat up until he finally found that counter to put Jordan Williams' lights out. And I thought Weeks would be able to replicate something similar to Jordan Williams. After running the tape, I just don't think so. I'm interested to see how Weeks does if he chooses to grapple here and uses his wrestling background, but that's not something that he usually leans on. Tried using it against Brian Barberena, was quite ineffective with it. I'd be surprised if he has much success here against Garry with it. He might be able to get him down once or twice early in this fight, but the longer that it goes on, I think Garry will start to take over. Then you kind of start to lean on the Darren Weeks via KO side, because that's how he got a lot of his work done on the regional scene. And Weeks by KO is currently about plus 600. So if you don't mind a little gamble, I think that's there's a little bit of value on there, but I think a lot of it is front loaded. The longer that this fight goes, the easier I think it will be for Garry to get away from those big strikes, because Weeks does telegraph a lot of his big shots, and I think we'll see Garry privy enough to it, get out of the way, and then get his own counters going. And Garry's a pretty big dude for this 170-pound division, right? In terms of height, let me get a specific height here for you guys, but he's always going to be the longer and rangier guy inside the cage. He's sitting at 6'3" with the 74-inch reach. Insane. Let me make sure UFC Stats has that correct as well. Yeah, 6'3" with a 74-inch reach. And then on the flip side for Darian Weeks, we're currently getting 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. So going to be, about 4 inches shorter, only a 2-inch reach advantage for Ian Garry there. But I think we're going to see that size play a huge factor in this fight. And with Ian Garry kind of maintaining his distance and just chipping him apart from the outside. And I think he could eventually get that finish as well. I do think that his counter-striking is very good, and he's going to make Darian Weeks pay. And I do think at a certain point, probably in the second or third round, he's going to catch him with one of those long counters, put him on his butt, and either choke him out or find a finish at a certain point. But if Weeks is going to get this fight done, it's got to be in the first round, because he does start to slow as the fights go on. And I'm not just saying that from the Brian Barberena fight, because that's a fight that he took on somewhat short notice, but I think he's going to struggle trying to find that bomb, which is kind of his go-to move in the majority of his fights. But I think he's going to struggle here against Ian Garry, who, again, I want to fade. I don't think he is as good as his record is making him out to be, or even the hype is making him out to be. But I just don't think that Darian Weeks is the guy to go out there and fade him with. Similar to Paddy Pimblett from the other week against Rodrigo Vargas. Again, there is going to be a good time for us to fade them at heavy dog odds. These are just not the times to do it yet. So I think Garry gets his hand raised. I'll see either second or third round TKO. All right. Let's move on to the next fight here. And again, this is the first fight confirmed for the main card with only 4 fights left. We got Mackenzie Dern taking on Tecia Torres. In terms of odds, we got to pick 'em fight here. There was money and love coming in on Mackenzie Dern late last week, but it seems to be evening out with that Tecia Torres love coming back as well now. I've done pretty well in Tecia Torres fights in terms of betting wise, right? I'm 4-1 in terms of betting her fights. The only time I whiffed was when I picked her to beat Marina Rodriguez, but I picked Jessica Andrade against her. I picked her as a big dog against Brianna Van Buren, and I was surprised at the amount of disrespect that was on her name in that fight against Van Buren. And then, she had a great performance against Angela Hill, beating her up in a stand-up fight with the main benefactor or the main factor being in that fight being the speed of Tecia Torres. She was just getting to the punches and combinations a lot quicker than what Angela Hill was throwing out there. Tecia is very experienced. She's very fast, she's very athletic, and she's very difficult to put away. I'd kind of be surprised if Mackenzie Dern is able to drag her into one of those spots where Dern gets her to the ground and uses or gets her submission going or even gets a submission victory. Because Tecia Torres is great defensively speaking with her takedowns, off of her back, being able to get back to her feet. The best wrestler that she's fought in her last several fights was Brianna Van Buren, who, let me get the correct number here, but Van Buren went... Let me just get the number here correct. I missed it, actually. I did not jot it down. Let me just quickly pull it up for you guys, though. But Brianna Van Buren missed on a lot of takedowns. She did land 2 in the first round, but Torres did a really good job in terms of getting right back to her feet. Brianna landed 2 takedowns, so she went 2 of 7 on takedowns, with 2 of those takedowns coming in the first round. But Van Buren, the most of her success coming in that round was just pushing Torres up against the cage, but Torres was able to dig the underhooks, get out, and then get back to her work, which is just being the better striker, which is why she was able to get the decision victory that night. I am not impressed with Mackenzie Dern's takedowns, right? A lot of it is kind of fluky-ish in terms of how she gets her submissions. Randa Marcos following her to the ground. Hannah Cyphers kind of doing the same thing. I'd be surprised if Torres gets goaded into that type of fight. She's going to want to keep this fight in the striking realm, and from there, she throws the much better combinations. She throws great kicks. She has great speed. She should be able to get in and out with her strikes before Mackenzie Dern's able to get on her hips and get some sort of takedown situation going at all. What's the takedown accuracy here on Mackenzie Dern? 10% takedown accuracy on Mackenzie Dern. We have a 58% takedown defense rate on Tecia Torres, but again, the way that Mackenzie Dern shoots her takedowns, just not good, in my opinion. I had a statistic here. I believe it was Mackenzie Dern has only landed 2 takedowns in 30 attempts. I think that's why she's only 3 of 28 on takedowns in her UFC career. Absolutely crazy. And now she's going to try to go out there and do that against Tecia Torres. Kind of surprised that the money was coming in on Mackenzie Dern to make her, a minus 130-ish favorite at a certain point. And how Tecia Torres is not a bigger favorite in this spot, I just don't completely understand. So I am going to go with the Tecia Torres side here. I think she's the better fighter. I think she'll be quicker on the feet, better with the combinations. And I wouldn't even mind poking Tecia Torres via TKO at plus 600. Outside of the Sam Hughes finish that she got, which was a little bit weird, considering that Sam Hughes just pretty much quit. Say what you want about her taking that fight on short notice. But this might look bad where Tecia Torres is just landing the better strikes and getting the better of her in those situations. Now, I get it. People might say, oh, Marina Rodriguez couldn't finish her over 5 rounds. Why do you think Tecia Torres is going to do that? It doesn't work like that. Just because Marina Rodriguez wasn't doesn't mean that Tecia Torres won't be able to either. It's just the speed discrepancy and her confidence in her takedown or takedown defense and ability to get back to her feet, which is something that Marina Rodriguez did not have, right? I think it was round 2 of Dern against Rodriguez where Dern spent 4 minutes with control time, and that was off of a failed takedown attempt, and she eventually got a reversal with a knee bar attempt or a footlock attempt. But Marina Rodriguez just was not confident in her ability to get back to her feet or stuff the takedowns, which is why she didn't really truly let go on her power. I think the speed of Torres mixed with the confidence that she'll have to keep this fight standing and keep it in her realm will allow her to potentially find that knockout. So at plus 600, it's going to get a little bit of a sprinkle for me, but as an official prediction, I'll take her to win this fight via decision. All right, let's move on to the fights that everybody is excited for. The top 3 fights here, first of which is Khamzat Chimaev coming in at minus 560, taking on Gilbert Burns at plus 410. Good God, we are getting a skyrocket here from Khamzat in terms of going from Li Jingliang all the way up to Gilbert Burns, who's a top 5 fighter who just fought for the title less than a couple fights ago. Now, Khamzat Chimaev is going to go out there and try to prove to us that he is actually as good as the hype is making him out to be. Now, before I hit record here, there was actually a clip that I came across from Brian Stan way back in 2017. He was asked, if there is not, name somebody who isn't in the UFC yet that you've been hearing about that will eventually make it to the UFC and you think will be very successful in doing so. And although Brian Stan didn't remember his name, he was clearly talking about Khamzat Chimaev way back in 2017. And I believe that was even before Khamzat had a professional fight. Let me quickly look into that. He's 10-0 right now. In 2017, he had 1 amateur fight in 2017. That's it. And then since then, he's just been absolutely wrecking shop, destroying everybody that he's gone up against. And now here he is going up against Gilbert Burns. And he's going to try to continue that lore that people have on him, where he is just this absolute monster and machine. Should the line be this wide? No. Gilbert Burns deserves a little bit more respect than that. However, I do think that Chimaev is going to live up to that lore and that those tales of him just absolutely beating up on guys in the training room, especially guys that are doing very well in the UFC. There's a reason there's this much hype on the kid, and if you just strictly look at his resume inside the UFC, he's gone out there and done what he's supposed to do against guys that he's supposed to do it against. Now he's getting a legitimate step up in competition, but I think he can still go out there and prove that he is one of the best in the world by beating a guy in Gilbert Burns who, He's looked good. His striking is getting better. Obviously, his bread and butter used to be his jiu-jitsu, but he has a ton of power in his hands, and his striking, like I said, his striking is getting better. But I just don't know if he has the chops to go out there and give Khamzat that trouble. I think Khamzat's top control is going to be a little bit too difficult for Gilbert to deal with, and not to mention, Gilbert used to be a 155-pounder. Khamzat's talking about fighting at 185 and 170 and holding both belts while defending both of them. And not just talking about it, right? He went up to 185 pounds and beat a couple guys. He's a big dude in his own right. And he has the grappling skills. He has the chops. He has the crazy ground and pound, that top control, all that good stuff. He is really good at what he does. And now he'll finally get to prove it against somebody that people will be like, okay, he did this to Gilbert Burns. I'll give him some more respect. And I was one of those guys back in the day that was like, okay, let's wait till he gets a legitimate step up in competition, and then I'll probably fade him at good underdog money. I'm getting the shot to do it now, but I just don't have the confidence to do it. If Kamaru Usman is an underdog to Khamzat Chimaev, I will make that bet. I won't do it here against Gilbert Burns. The Chimaev's wrestling is just way better than what Burns brings to the table, and Burns has shown that he can be broken. And Chimaev is one of the best in the world in terms of breaking people. So I'm going Chimaev. I think Chimaev gets it done inside the distance, but the spot that I'm really liking here is the fight doesn't go to the decision, which is hanging around minus 225 and minus 270, depending on where you're looking at and which bookie. Because if Burns gets the finish, maybe it's off of a submission of some sort, or maybe he finds a knockout blow. But given how Khamzat Chimaev fights, which is forward pressure, forward movement, and just non-stop pressure, he more often than not will always find the finish. And I think he'll be able to find the finish here against Gilbert Burns as well. So the official pick is going to be Khamzat Chimaev inside the distance. KO, submission. I'm not sure how it's going to come, but I think he gets him out of there. But I'll likely be parlaying the fight doesn't go to the decision, as I do think that's quite a safe spot here. Again, main ingredient being Khamzat and his style of just forward pressure all the time and just always causing action. I think it's going to result in a finish one way or another, and I think it's actually going to be Khamzat that gets his hand raised in this spot. All right, co-main event time. Bantamweight strap on the line here. Champion Aljamain Sterling going up against interim champ Petr Yan. We all know how the first fight went. Actually, you know what? Let me just give you guys the odds here first. Minus 450 on Yan, plus 350 the return on Aljamain Sterling. We all know how the first fight went. Aljamain Sterling, picked up the first round, then start to fall behind in the second and third rounds, and then obviously the illegal knee in round 4, which gave Aljamain Sterling the title. Since then, Yan went out there and dispatched of Corey Sandhagen, who won the first round against Yan, but then Yan picked up on his pace, picked up on his patterns, picked up on his tendencies, and then eventually started to take over, and then obviously won that fight via decision. Excuse me. It feels like I'm getting the hiccups in the middle of this breakdown, but we got 2 fights left, so let me power on through this. The Corey Sandhagen fight is the one where I'm giving giving up on fading Petr Yan. I played him, I think, at like plus 200 or something like that. I don't recall the exact number there. But I thought if anybody was going to beat Yan, it was going to be Corey. The guy had, the activity, the cardio, the output. That's all I needed. Because Yan at times is low volume, and he could be, out-volumed in certain spots. But Sandhagen still couldn't get it done. Yan was just waiting for the perfect times to just drop him, land him the more significant strikes, and that's obviously what was able to get him the win there. And if Aljamain Sterling tries to do the same thing, I just don't know if he has the cardio to do so. Like, I've heard arguments that, Sterling wasted too much energy going for takedowns, but even in a fight against Pedro Munoz where he goes out there and tries to fight the way that people want him to fight Petr Yan, he was slowing down later in that fight too. Petr Yan just gets stronger as the fight goes on, and I think it's just a matter of time before he finds Aljamain Sterling's chin and puts him out, or just batters him and then eventually TKOs him. I think this is going to be a high-action fight. I think Sterling might try to come in there and go about the Pedro Munoz game plan and try to just pick him apart from the outside, but it's just the kicks and the combinations and the significant strikes are going to start to be there for Petr Yan the longer that the fight goes, and then I think he eventually finishes him later in this fight. So I do like the Petr Yan side here. I might parlay him. I'm not 100% sure at this point in time. Maybe I'll parlay him with the fight prior with Khamzat Chimaev's fight doesn't go to decision. But I think he wins at a pretty high clip. Again, we saw what Sterling had in the first fight. I just don't think he has the cardio to go out there and implement a solid 15 to 20 minute game plan against Yan before he gets finished at the end of this fight. So I'll go Piotr Jan. I'm going to take him to win inside the distance. He is one of the best, if not the best fighter walking the earth right now with the way that he fights. And I think he'll showcase it once again here against Aljamain Sterling. Last thing I'll say, I think the line is a little bit out of whack just because of the public perception of Aljamain Sterling. If you guys remember, I think it was close to a pick'em when the first time they fought, but obviously we saw how the fight played out, and now the line is a little bit skewed because of that. But if it wasn't because of if he lost like a close decision or something like that, or even if he lost a 49-46 decision and they rematched, and that illegal knee fiasco did not happen, I think we'd still get Aljamain Sterling maybe around plus 200, plus 250. But considering all the jokes and the clowning around and all that shit that people are doing on Aljamain Sterling's name, that's why the line is up at minus 450, minus 500, in my opinion. So, again, I'll still go with Piotr Jan here. I think he wins this fight at a decent clip. He might go down early, so maybe a live entry on this fight is a good way to go about it, where you take Piotr Jan going into round 2, where you might get the line slightly better. But if you're a parlaying type of guy, kind of like I like to do as well, obviously you won't be able to parlay live. But I don't mind parlaying Piotr Jan at minus 450 in the spot. I think he finishes Aljamain Sterling at a certain point. I saw, shout out to FanDuel, who just opened up north of the border here. I saw Jan round 4, round 5 decision sitting at minus 180. I think that's a damn good line as well. So make sure you guys check that out and try that out too. But I like Piotr Jan. Piotr Jan straight up, Piotr Jan finishing Sterling late. That's kind of the angle that I'm going with for this fight. All right, main event time. We got Alexander Volkanovski coming in at minus 800, taking on Korean Zombie, coming in at plus 500. Great fight here. Obviously, it was supposed to be Max Holloway for the third time. Unfortunately, that fight does not happen, and Max Holloway pulls out literally moments after they announced the fight. Holloway was dealing with some sort of injury, but in steps Chan Sung-Jung to make this fight happen. Now, Chan Sung-Jung 2-1 in his last couple fights here. Obviously, he lost that fight to Brian Ortega in October of 2020. Bounces back with the win over Dan Ige, and now he gets a title shot here. He still looks to be on at times, right? His striking looks good. He has massive power in his hands, and that's kind of been the downfall of Alexander Volkanovski. Well, not downfall, but that's kind of been the flaw in his game, is the fact that he's been quite hittable over his last several fights. If you do just a little bit of an inspection of the competition that Volkanovski has been fighting as of late, not a lot of guys have crazy knockout power. Like, let me just pull up here what I had in my best bets and props article. Short notice nature of this fight makes people dismiss Zombie's chances, which is correct. He still has a killer hand speed and solid power. Volkanovski is quite hittable, and the truth is we just haven't seen him fight someone with KO power like Korean Zombie. Holloway is a guy that gets you out of there with volume, not power. Aldo has really diminished in his ability to finish guys as of late. Mendez doesn't KO anybody other than, it was Volkanovski who actually ended up KOing him. So, like I'm not saying that Korean Zombie has crazy knockout power by any means, like Francis Ngannou type knockout power, but he still does have some pop on his shots, and he can cause Volkanovski some issues. So maybe taking a shot on Jung by KO or Jung inside the distance around plus 1,000 isn't that bad of a hedge, especially if you find yourself really heavily weighted on the Volkanovski side here, parlaying with everything. I would not parlay Volkanovski, though. At minus 800, it just does not do enough for your parlay for it to be worth it, especially with the amount of threat that Korean Zombie will be having in this fight. Like I said, you could give Korean Zombie a slight advantage in terms of the striking. Again, mixing his combinations, his power, his fluidity, it could be better than the fight IQ of Volkanovski in terms of implementing leg kicks and then letting his striking go behind that. I would like to see Volkanovski drag this fight to the ground and try to just damage him from on top. That's probably where he is safest and will have the best success. I do think Volkanovski will still go out there and get the win. I still think that he's the better overall fighter. I just don't like how hittable he is. And that's where I think that Jung could possibly find some success. So don't go, throwing your house on Volkanovski in this spot, because this is a very dangerous fight for him. If you like value, the clear value is on the Jung side. But if you just want a winner, Volkanovski is probably the side there. But I tweeted it Or even I put it on my Instagram a couple weeks ago at the UFC London card, specifically for the Corey McKenna versus Elise Reed fight. I'm like, if you want winners, you pick Corey McKenna. If you want value, you pick Elise Reed. And what happened that night? Elise Reed got the win. So again, same thing could be here where Volkanovski could be the winner, but the value is clearly on Jung's side. And if the ball bounces your way, you're cashing a plus 500 ticket. I just don't have the balls to bet against the guy in Volkanovski, who I think is one of the most complete fighters in the game. So I'm picking Volkanovski. No action on this fight. Maybe the over 1.5 at minus 175, but I still think that's a little bit crazy. Volkanovski via decision at minus 150. I wouldn't mind that. I would much rather play that than play anything else or even parlay Volkanovski in the spot. So yeah, I'll go Volkanovski via decision, and I think he retains, and then I think we get the Holloway rematch a couple months down the road. But I think Volkanovski continues his reign as champion. All right. That's a wrap on the breakdowns. Appreciate you guys sitting through this for the last hour or however long that this podcast has went. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you guys want to show your boy a little extra support, $5 a month. The link to the Patreon is in the description below. So make sure you guys go check that out. Check out Coolbet, coolbet.com. Use promo code MMALOTN2 and they'll match your initial deposit up to $200. You can parlay props. You can get all this crazy good stuff on Coolbet. So make sure you guys go check that out. And lastly, I'll put out one last call for the Dog of the Night Challenge. The current editions wrap up with this event, meaning the next event or the next edition it starts up with the next event, which is Vicente Luque against Bilal Muhammad. But the deadline to sign up is April 10th. So that's the day after UFC 273. We have a $25 edition, $100 edition, and $500 edition, the high stakes edition. If you have any interest in that, if you like betting underdogs, this game is for you. We got a ton of great people in there, a ton of people that have returned time and time again. This is going to be the 10th edition of the Dog of the Night Challenge that I've done, and I hope to break the records of the past pools that we've had. So again, you pick one underdog for every UFC event, whether it's an underdog or an over-under at plus money, accumulate the most profit. If you end up in the top 3, you get paid out with the pot. Simple as that. If you're interested in that, slide in my DMs on Twitter or Instagram, and I'll make sure you guys are set up properly there and get you ready to go for April 10th. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoy UFC 273. Got the Coach's Main Event Marathon coming out in a couple days. Make sure you guys go check that out when it drops. We'll have Mark Montoya, Eric Nixick, and Santino DeFranco all breaking down the title fights for us, and then obviously giving us their pick for the competition portion of the show for the main card. I got a great guest lined up for the Ultimate Wayne show. I got Cody Safta coming on for propping you up on Thursday over on the All-Star. So make sure you guys go check that up. So a full week of great content headed your way. And it all starts off with the MMA Lawcast here. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. Hit that like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys throughout the week.